In a converted industrial space in a lively urban neighborhood, a trendy coffee house, known as Midnight Roast, had become the heartbeat of its community. With exposed brick walls, mismatched vintage furniture, and the aroma of freshly ground beans permeating the air, the cafe was a magnet for artists, students, and anyone seeking a temporary escape from the city's relentless pace. Every day, the space buzzed with conversations over steaming cups of artisan brew, impromptu poetry readings, and the soft strum of acoustic guitars. Yet beneath the warm, inviting atmosphere, an undercurrent of tension and unspoken secrets simmered, unknown to most who passed through its doors. On a sultry evening in late summer, as twilight deepened into a velvety darkness, the usual hum of chatter and clinking cups subsided with the closing of the cafe. Staff were busy tidying up, switching off the espresso machines, and preparing for the quiet hours before dawn. It was during this routine after-hours period that a horrifying discovery was made, a discovery that would shatter the fragile sense of safety that Midnight Roast had long provided. In the cramped storeroom behind the counter, a space cluttered with boxes of coffee beans, extra supplies, and relics from past events, a lone employee, Jordan Ellis, arrived to retrieve a misplaced shipment. Jordan, a seasoned barista known for his attention to detail and his gentle manner, found something he couldn't ignore. Tucked behind a stack of promotional flyers was the lifeless body of Lila Torres, a vibrant young barista with a promising future. Lila's once bright eyes were clouded in an expression of profound shock, her features frozen as if time itself had halted. Clutched tightly in her grasp was a torn scrap of paper, its message scrawled in hurried, almost desperate handwriting. No one escapes what they uncover. The sight struck Jordan with paralyzing terror. His voice, trembling with disbelief, radioed the incident, and within minutes, uniformed officers and forensic specialists swarmed the space. The sound of footsteps and hushed commands replaced the earlier murmur of cleaning routines, transforming the storeroom into a crime scene marked by stark contrasts, a scene where the everyday was brutally interrupted by the macabre. Detective Samantha Reyes, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for perceptiveness and a quiet determination to pursue the smallest detail, arrived at Midnight Roast shortly thereafter. The soft buzz of fluorescent lights cast long, erratic shadows across the room as she surveyed the scene with a practiced eye. Lila Torres's body was positioned deliberately against the wall, and there was an eerie order to the surroundings. No sign of a violent scuffle, no scattered personal belongings, only the subtle disruption of a routine space, and the solitary scrap bearing a foreboding message. Reyes noted every nuance, the angle of the victim's outstretched hand, the faint trail of dried blood leading toward a supply closet, the muted scent of spilled coffee mingled with something metallic and acrid, and filed them carefully away in her mind. It was clear that the act had not been random. It was a premeditated effort to silence someone whose life had become entangled in dangerous discoveries. Over the next several days, Detective Reyes conducted a series of interviews with the cafe's staff and regulars. Many spoke of Lila Torres with a mixture of admiration and sorrow. A co-worker named Jade recalled that Lila had been one of the first to greet new customers with a kind word and an infectious smile. She was more than just a barista, Jade said, voice soft with emotion. She was a storyteller in her own right, always scribbling ideas in her notebook, always curious about the world around her. Yet a few staff members mentioned that in recent weeks, Lila had appeared increasingly troubled. One shift supervisor confided that Lila had been spending long hours after closing, poring over old documents and making cryptic phone calls that she wouldn't explain. Although no one knew the full extent of her investigations, these murmurs hinted that Lila might have been delving into something beyond the everyday hustle of coffee orders and friendly banter. Determined to piece together Lila's final days, Detective Reyes obtained access to her personal belongings from her modest apartment in a nearby neighborhood. There, amid a few cherished photographs and well-worn novels, lay Lila's journal, a small leather-bound notebook with pages filled in a neat flowing script. Early entries described the simple joys of life, a favorite coffee blend, a memorable conversation with a customer, and sketches of the cafe's interior. But as the entries progressed, the tone darkened. Lila began writing about strange inconsistencies in the cafe's supply records and unexplained delays in deliveries. One passage read, "Every shipment seems to be missing something, a few extra bags of coffee here, a couple of boxes of pastries gone in transit. I'm not sure if it's negligence or something more deliberate." Another, more urgent note stated, "I've noticed names on invoices that don't match our orders. If this isn't just a mistake, then someone is tampering with our deliveries. I must find out who." The final pages, scrawled hurriedly in the margins, hinted at a secret meeting planned for that very week, one that Lila had intended to attend, despite her growing fears. Digital forensic experts were able to recover fragments of deleted messages from Lila's smartphone, which she had used sporadically during her shifts and on her quiet evenings at home. Among the recovered texts was one chilling message sent from an untraceable number: "Stop digging or you'll be next." The message, void of any personal identifiers yet dripping with malice, confirmed what Detective Reyes had come to suspect. Lila's relentless pursuit of a hidden truth had made her a target. As Reyes continued her investigation, she expanded her inquiries beyond the walls of Midnight Roast. She interviewed local vendors who supplied the cafe, including a longtime supplier of premium coffee beans named Marcus, who had been in business for nearly 30 years. Marcus recalled that shipments to the coffee house had in recent months occasionally arrived with missing quantities. "I'd pack an order, count the bags carefully, and sometimes a couple would be unaccounted for," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I thought it was just a mistake at first, but then I started hearing that someone was altering the orders after they left my warehouse." His testimony added a new dimension to the case. It suggested that the irregularities Lila had noticed might be part of a larger operation to divert goods for illicit purposes. Local law enforcement's digital team worked to reconstruct the timeline of Lila's communications, correlating the deleted texts with her journal entries and the operational logs from the cafe's inventory system. The emerging pattern was unsettling. On several occasions, the discrepancies in deliveries and missing items were logged on the same day that Lila had noted receiving anonymous warnings. When cross-referenced with the surveillance footage from Midnight Roast, a series of grainy images capturing patrons and staff during the evening hours, it became evident that there had been subtle movements in the back areas of the cafe that were not part of routine operations. In one sequence of footage, a shadowy figure was seen moving quickly along a narrow corridor behind the storeroom, disappearing into the dim recesses of the building just as Lila had been spotted by a coworker. Although the figure's face remained obscured, the deliberate nature of his movements and the timing of his appearance suggested that he was connected to the anomalies. With each new piece of evidence, Detective Reyes began to suspect that the irregularities at Midnight Roast were not the result of random error or petty theft. Instead, they pointed to a deliberate scheme orchestrated by individuals with privileged access, those who could manipulate inventory records and divert valuable goods without drawing immediate attention. The profits from such an operation could be considerable, especially if the missing items were being sold on the black market to rival cafes or even to underground collectors of rare coffee blends. But more than financial gain, there was the possibility that these illicit activities were linked to a personal vendetta, a dark, tangled web of resentment and betrayal that had ensnared Lila in its grip. Detective Reyes focused her attention on the management of Midnight Roast. In interviews with the cafe's owner, a soft-spoken entrepreneur named Damian Ruiz, she probed into recent changes in the internal processes. Damian, a man with an unassuming smile and a passion for quality coffee, expressed shock at the loss of one of his most beloved employees. "Lila was the heart of our place," he said, voice trembling with emotion. "She had a way of seeing things that most people overlooked. I never imagined that her curiosity would lead to something like this." Yet his expression betrayed a flicker of unease when pressed about the inventory discrepancies. While he insisted that the operational adjustments were routine, subtle inconsistencies in his recollections raised further questions. Further inquiry into the cafe's internal practices revealed that in recent months, a new protocol had been implemented, a system that allowed for flexible adjustments in daily inventory figures. While the policy was presented as a measure to accommodate fluctuations in demand, digital records showed that these adjustments often coincided with the delivery schedules of the premium coffee beans and artisanal pastries. Detective Reyes began to suspect that the new system was a cover for a deliberate diversion of goods. It was possible that someone within the management team was exploiting the policy to siphon off items that could then be sold or traded in clandestine markets. The investigation took a dramatic turn when a confidential informant, a longtime employee of the cafe who had recently left under undisclosed circumstances, approached Detective Reyes with a sealed envelope. Inside were several photocopies of internal memos and emails that hinted at an ongoing dispute within the management team. One memo, dated a few weeks before Lila's death, instructed staff to ensure that all discrepancies remain unchallenged and warned that any deviation from the approved numbers would be met with swift action. The language was clinical yet chilling, and it reinforced the theory that Lila's probing had disturbed a carefully maintained operation. As the days passed, the digital forensic team managed to recover a nearly complete backup of Lila's encrypted text messages. The recovered files contained additional warnings, each one a stark reminder that there were powerful forces intent on keeping the truth concealed. One message read simply, "You're in over your head." The repetition of such messages created an atmosphere of dread and underscored the likelihood that Lila's murder was not an isolated incident, but rather a calculated effort to prevent further exposure of the illicit scheme. Determined to tie the threads together, Detective Reyes arranged a meeting with a local expert in inventory management and loss prevention. Dr. Julian Park, a consultant who had spent decades advising businesses on effective stock control, reviewed the recovered documents and digital logs with a practiced eye. "What I see here is a pattern, a systematic extraction of valuable items that has been normalized through subtle adjustments," Dr. Park explained. "In a business as competitive as this, even minor discrepancies can add up over time. But when the losses are too consistent, it suggests that someone is deliberately taking advantage." His analysis provided a crucial piece of the puzzle, linking the physical evidence of missing items with the digital records of inventory adjustments. The breakthrough came when forensic accountants compared the timing of the missing inventory with the log of internal adjustments. They discovered that on nearly every occasion when the discrepancies were noted, the adjustments were made by a single individual, a newly promoted supervisor named Julian Torres. Torres, whose rise within the cafe had been rapid and seemingly unremarkable, emerged as a person of interest. When questioned, Julian maintained that he had been following standard protocols, but his responses were marked by an almost palpable nervousness. Further examination of his digital footprint revealed that he had accessed the system at unusual hours, times that coincided with the delivery windows during which the discrepancies occurred. As Detective Reyes pressed deeper, additional evidence pointed to a troubling possibility: the diversion of goods at Midnight Roast was not solely a matter of financial loss, it was part of a broader scheme involving personal betrayal. Anonymous messages recovered from Lila's phone, combined with eyewitness accounts from co-workers, suggested that the operation might have been orchestrated by someone who had felt personally aggrieved, a person whose ambitions had been thwarted and who had resorted to extreme measures to silence dissent. The atmosphere of quiet camaraderie that had once defined the cafe was now tinged with suspicion and a sense of foreboding. In one particularly revealing interview, a longtime barista named Simone recalled a conversation she had with Lila just days before her death. "She told me, there's something here, something they're not telling us. I feel like I'm chasing shadows, and the deeper I go, the more dangerous it becomes." Simone's voice had trembled with both fear and determination, a mixture that spoke to the high stakes of the investigation. Her recollection reinforced the notion that Lila had known she was treading dangerous ground, a ground where powerful forces would stop at nothing to ensure that the secrets remained hidden. As the investigation reached a fever pitch, federal agents were brought in to assist with the broader inquiry into potential criminal networks associated with stolen merchandise. A joint task force was formed, combining local law enforcement, digital forensic experts, and inventory specialists. Over the course of several weeks, the task force uncovered evidence that the missing items had been funneled to an underground market that operated through a series of small independent dealers. These dealers, known only by pseudonyms on online forums and in encrypted communications, had been purchasing surplus equipment and specialty items at below-market rates, later reselling them to a network of buyers who prized authenticity and rarity. The financial gains from these transactions, while modest individually, added up to a substantial profit for those involved. The task force's detailed report confirmed that the operation was a well-oiled machine, a coordinated effort that relied on both digital manipulation and physical diversion of goods. The evidence pointed to a structure that spanned multiple layers of management at Midnight Roast and extended into external criminal networks. In light of this, Detective Reyes compiled her findings into a comprehensive dossier that detailed every element of the case, from the discovery of Lila's body and the cryptic note in her grasp to the intricate web of digital records that mapped the diversion of inventory. Every piece of evidence, whether a handwritten journal entry or a deleted text message, was meticulously catalogued and cross-referenced, building a narrative that was as damning as it was complex. The case soon reached a critical juncture when the task force received another anonymous tip, a single envelope delivered to Detective Reyes's office. Inside was a stack of photocopied documents, including internal memos and a series of altered inventory reports, along with a typed note that read, "When the lights dim, the truth comes out." The documents corroborated much of what had been uncovered, a pattern of systematic adjustments, the involvement of key personnel in authorizing transfers, and the eerie precision with which the operation was conducted. The note, devoid of any signature, hinted at a deeper involvement, suggesting that someone among the higher echelons was monitoring the investigation closely and was prepared to intervene if necessary. Armed with the overwhelming evidence, Detective Reyes presented her case to the local prosecutor in a series of closed-door briefings. The dossier detailed the steady extraction of valuable goods, the digital breadcrumbs left behind by anonymous warnings, and the personal journal of Lila Torres, a testament to her quiet determination and her unyielding commitment to uncovering the truth. The prosecutor, moved by the gravity of the findings, obtained a series of search warrants for offices and storage facilities associated with the management of Midnight Roast. In a coordinated operation involving federal agents and local officers, investigators raided several locations, seizing stacks of internal documents, digital files, and even physical evidence that tied the missing items directly to the individuals implicated in the internal adjustments. In a tense courtroom in the regional center, federal prosecutors presented the case in a marathon trial that spanned several weeks. Expert witnesses took the stand, explaining in clear terms how the minor discrepancies in inventory, when aggregated over time, amounted to a deliberate misappropriation of resources. Forensic accountants used detailed charts and graphs to demonstrate the pattern of theft, while digital experts showcased recovered files that contained chilling messages and directives. Witnesses from the cafe recounted the atmosphere of quiet intimidation that had pervaded the workplace, with several describing how questioning the status quo had been met with subtle threats and outright warnings. One former employee, his voice trembling with the memory of suppressed fear, said, "I was told, don't ask too many questions or you'll be the next to disappear." His testimony, along with the physical evidence, painted an unassailable picture of a systematic cover-up. Detective Reyes herself testified, recounting the discovery of Lila Torres's body with a calm determination that belied the tragedy of the event. Her testimony was a careful balance of factual precision and the emotional weight of the investigation, each detail a testament to the lengths she had gone to piece together the mystery. She described the layout of the storeroom, the positioning of the body, the contents of Lila's journal, and the eerie consistency of the digital threats. Every word resonated with the understanding that this was more than an isolated incident, it was an organized effort to suppress a dangerous inquiry. While several mid-level managers and staff members involved in the adjustments were convicted on charges ranging from fraud and conspiracy to accessory to homicide, the trial did not fully unmask all the higher-ups who had orchestrated the scheme. Some of the top executives evaded the harshest penalties by exploiting legal loopholes and the protective layers of corporate structure. Their names were redacted from many public documents, leaving behind a lingering uncertainty about the full extent of the conspiracy. For many in the courtroom and the broader community, the verdict was bittersweet, a partial victory that exposed much but left crucial questions unanswered. In the aftermath of the trial, Midnight Roast reopened its doors to a community now acutely aware that beneath the vibrant veneer of daily life, hidden networks could operate with lethal precision. The cafe's walls, once filled solely with the sounds of lively conversations and the comforting aroma of coffee, now resonated with a quieter awareness, a reminder of the sacrifices made by those who dared to challenge established power structures. Local authorities, spurred by the public's demand for accountability, introduced new protocols to ensure rigorous oversight of inventory and more transparent internal processes. Whistleblower protections were strengthened, and community forums were held to discuss the importance of safeguarding both public resources and individual voices. Detective Reyes, though praised for her relentless pursuit of the truth, remained haunted by the case. Late at night, as the city's neon glow gave way to the soft hum of solitude, she would pore over Lila's journal and the digital files recovered from the cafe's system. The memory of Lila's hopeful yet fearful words, the cryptic warnings from anonymous sources, and the subtle details captured in surveillance footage, all these continued to echo in her mind. Every uncovered discrepancy, every whispered threat, served as both a badge of honor and a heavy burden, reminding her that the fight for transparency is an endless journey. Over time, the case of Lila Torres became woven into the fabric of local history, a narrative recounted in academic seminars, discussed in town hall meetings, and memorialized in independent documentaries. It served as a catalyst for reform, inspiring community leaders to adopt measures that would prevent similar abuses in the future. The story of a dedicated barista who had risked everything to seek the truth, only to pay the ultimate price, galvanized a generation of advocates for ethical governance and accountability in everyday institutions. In one reflective moment, Detective Reyes walked through the quiet parking lot of Midnight Roast on a cool morning. The space, once a backdrop for casual farewells and daily routines, now felt like hallowed ground, a solemn reminder that beneath the facade of ordinary life, there are battles fought in silence, sacrifices made in secrecy, and truths that, however deeply buried, demand to be unearthed. In her heart, she vowed that every new case would be approached with the same unwavering commitment to justice, that every piece of evidence, no matter how inconspicuous, would be pursued until it yielded its hidden story. There were no perfect conclusions in the saga of Midnight Roast. The trial had delivered some measure of justice, yet the upper levels of the conspiracy remained shrouded in mystery. The redacted names, the elusive figure captured in grainy footage, and the final, ominous messages left behind continued to remind the community that even a well-loved institution can harbor dark, insidious secrets. For those who frequented the cafe, every sip of coffee and every quiet conversation carried the unspoken awareness that the price of truth could be immeasurably high. Years later, as new patrons filled the cafe and the clatter of cups and soft murmurs of conversation returned, the story of Lila Torres persisted, a legacy of courage and sacrifice that inspired new efforts to maintain transparency and protect those who spoke out. The case was studied by scholars, referenced by reformers, and remembered by a community that refused to let the darkness of the past overshadow the promise of a more honest future. Detective Samantha Reyes continued to work on new cases with a steadfast resolve, her experiences at Midnight Roast serving as a constant reminder that no secret is too deeply hidden when there are those determined to bring it into the light. In every investigation, whether it involved a small oversight or a massive cover-up, she carried with her the lessons learned from that fateful night, a testament to the enduring power of one person's quest for truth in the face of overwhelming odds. And so, amid the rhythmic pulse of daily life at a beloved cafe, and the quiet determination of those who believed that integrity must prevail, the story of Lila Torres remained etched into the collective memory, a story not of neat resolutions or heroic finales, but of ongoing vigilance, quiet courage, and the relentless pursuit of a truth that, no matter how deeply concealed, will eventually emerge from the shadows. On a warm summer evening along the rugged shoreline, the boardwalk bustled with its usual mix of families, tourists, and locals enjoying the seaside air. Wind chimes tinkled in gentle rhythm as the salty breeze mingled with laughter and the soft hum of conversation. For decades, the boardwalk had been a place where memories were made, a backdrop to casual strolls, impromptu performances, and historical tours that recounted tales of smugglers, shipwrecks, and long-forgotten legends. Yet beneath the veneer of everyday enjoyment, a dark current was quietly gathering strength, destined to upend the cherished narrative of the coastal town. Evan Ramirez was one such storyteller whose passion for history had earned him a revered place among locals. A lifelong resident with an encyclopedic knowledge of the town's past, he guided countless visitors along the weathered boardwalk, recounting stories of a bygone era with infectious enthusiasm. His deep, resonant voice brought to life legends of a historic lighthouse, daring sea rescues, and mysterious disappearances that had plagued the area decades ago. But in recent months, Evan had become increasingly preoccupied with one cold case, a 30-year-old unsolved murder that had once rocked the community. According to local lore, a prominent civic leader had been gunned down under circumstances so murky that even the oldest residents whispered about it only in hushed tones. Evan had grown convinced that there were hidden details buried in long-forgotten records that could finally bring clarity to that tragic event. Every day after his tours, Evan spent hours combing through archives at the small-town museum and poring over yellowed newspapers in the local library's dusty backroom. He meticulously cross-referenced dates, noted discrepancies in old property deeds, and scribbled down theories in a battered spiral notebook he carried everywhere. His friends remarked that he was different lately, more withdrawn and pensive, his eyes distant even during the busiest hours on the boardwalk. "He's chasing ghosts," his friend Marcus would say with a shrug, though even Marcus couldn't ignore the fervor that had taken hold of him. Then one fateful night, everything changed. Just after closing time, when the boardwalk's neon signs flickered on and the crowd had long since dispersed, a solitary figure was seen wandering along the pier. His silhouette, illuminated by the soft glow of a street lamp, moved with an urgent determination. By dawn, his lifeless body was discovered at the base of an old weathered jetty, lying face down in the wet sand. Clutched in his hand was a scrap of paper bearing a single ominous sentence: "Some truths are meant to remain buried." The victim was soon identified as Evan Ramirez. News of his death spread rapidly through the community. The man who had once animated the boardwalk with tales of adventure and mystery was now gone, leaving behind more questions than answers. Shocked relatives, distraught tour participants, and anxious historians gathered at the local police station, demanding that someone explain how such a gentle soul could have met a violent end. Detective Laura Ortiz, a seasoned investigator, known for her unwavering determination and intuitive insight, was assigned to the case. She arrived at the scene early that morning, greeted by the rhythmic lapping of waves and the forlorn cry of gulls overhead. The area where Evan's body had been found was cordoned off, marked by yellow tape that contrasted starkly with the soft hues of dawn. Ortiz crouched near the remains, taking in every detail: the way his body had been arranged in a seemingly deliberate pose, the absence of any signs of struggle in the immediate vicinity, and the scrap of paper with its chilling message. Something about the placement of his hand suggested that even in death, Evan had tried to communicate, perhaps to warn, perhaps to expose. In the days that followed, Detective Ortiz began a methodical investigation. She interviewed staff at the boardwalk, starting with those who worked at the popular souvenir stands and snack kiosks, and later speaking with employees at the town museum and library. Many recalled that Evan had been secretive in recent months, often leaving his shift early to head toward the archives. One archivist mentioned that Evan had asked repeatedly for access to old police reports and property records related to the unsolved murder. "He seemed almost haunted by it," she said softly, eyes downcast. "I remember him muttering, 'The past won't let go until it's revealed.'" While gathering witness statements, Ortiz also requested access to Evan's personal belongings. In his modest apartment, a cluttered space filled with stacks of historical books, faded photographs, and mementos of family gatherings, investigators discovered his spiral notebook. Its pages worn at the edges revealed hours of painstaking research. The entries began with mundane details of everyday boardwalk life, but gradually they shifted into coded notes and observations about discrepancies in archived records. One entry, scrawled in a hurried hand just a week before his death, read, "The old case isn't closed, it's smudged over, like ink spilled on paper. I need to trace every altered record before the truth evaporates." Another entry ominously noted, "They warned me not to dig too deep. I'm not sure who they are, but I can't stop now." The tone of these entries conveyed a sense of urgency and personal peril. Digital experts, brought in to analyze Evan's work computer and personal devices, managed to recover several deleted emails. Among them were messages exchanged with an unknown correspondent using the handle Oracle. One particularly chilling email read, "Cease your inquiry or be prepared for the consequences." Although the identity behind Oracle remained hidden behind layers of encryption, the message confirmed what Detective Ortiz had long suspected. Evan's investigation had alarmed someone with considerable influence, and that someone had taken drastic measures to ensure that the past stayed buried. With mounting evidence, Detective Ortiz shifted her focus to the unsolved cold case that had captivated Evan's attention: the murder of Councilman Richard Ellis, a prominent figure who had been shot during a contentious political dispute decades earlier. Public records, including faded newspaper clippings and old police reports, painted a picture of a turbulent time in the town's history. Councilman Ellis had been a polarizing figure, known for his fiery speeches and uncompromising stance on local issues. His murder had remained unsolved, with theories ranging from political retaliation to organized crime involvement. Evans' research suggested that the evidence had been tampered with, that key documents had been altered or lost, and that influential figures had worked behind the scenes to obscure the truth. Detective Ortiz visited the town's modest archive at the County Historical Society, where aging records and brittle documents were stored in a cool, dark room. There she met Dr. Elaine Cooper, a historian specializing in local politics. Over cups of strong coffee and amidst stacks of microfilm, Dr. Cooper explained that the murder of Councilman Ellis had been shrouded in controversy from the start. "There were always rumors," she said quietly. "Whispers of cover-ups, of influential families wanting to erase a blemish on their legacy. Most of the records from that time are incomplete, but what remains suggests that the truth was deliberately obscured." Dr. Cooper's insights added a new layer to the investigation, linking Evans' recent inquiries to a historical narrative that spanned generations. As the digital forensics team reconstructed Evans' email history, they uncovered a series of exchanges with Oracle that hinted at a meeting arranged under the cover of secrecy. According to one recovered message, the meeting was scheduled to occur at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a location long rumored to have been used as a safe house by those involved in illicit activities during the turbulent decades following Councilman Ellis's death. Although the meeting never took place, its mention was enough to confirm that powerful forces were actively monitoring Evans' progress. Detective Ortiz then compiled a list of persons of interest. Among the names that emerged was that of Harold Monroe, a retired police officer who had been a key figure in the investigation of Councilman Ellis's murder back in the day. Monroe, now living a quiet life in a modest home, had long been reluctant to speak publicly about the case. In a private interview, he admitted that he had suspicions about a conspiracy involving influential families who had used their clout to steer the investigation away from the truth. "There were things I saw, allegations that never made it into the official reports," he confessed in a trembling voice. "I always thought that someone powerful was working to bury the case. I never imagined it would come back to haunt us now." His testimony lent weight to the notion that Evans' pursuit of the old case had stirred up dangerous memories, and that his own fate might have been sealed by those who feared exposure. Meanwhile, Detective Ortiz received another anonymous tip, this one delivered as a handwritten letter slipped under her office door. The letter, printed on plain paper and lacking any signature, contained a single sentence that sent chills down her spine. "The past never dies quietly." It also included a faded photograph of a young woman standing in front of an old ivy-covered building, a building that local lore suggested had once belonged to the family suspected of having altered the historical records of Councilman Ellis's case. The photograph and note, though enigmatic, reinforced the idea that the cover-up was part of a long-standing effort to manipulate the narrative of the town's history. Over the following weeks, the investigation intensified. Federal agents were brought in to assist with the forensic analysis of historical records and to examine the digital remnants of Evans' deleted files. A joint task force was established, combining local law enforcement, digital experts, and historians, all determined to uncover the truth behind the manipulated records. Their collective work uncovered a pattern of alterations in archived documents, small changes that, when aggregated, painted a picture of deliberate tampering. The task force's report indicated that over the span of several decades, key records had been revised to benefit a powerful local dynasty whose legacy was built on both philanthropy and quiet coercion. The revelation was profound. Not only had Councilman Ellis's murder been covered up, but the subsequent erasure of certain historical truths had been an ongoing process, one that continued to affect the town's collective memory. As the case reached a turning point, Detective Ortiz compiled all her findings into a comprehensive file and presented her evidence to the district attorney. The dossier included Evans' painstaking journal entries, the recovered digital communications from Oracle, testimonies from longtime residents and former investigators, and the altered archival records from the Historical Society. In a series of closed-door grand jury sessions held in a modest county courthouse, the full scope of the cover-up was laid bare, a network of corruption and historical revisionism that spanned generations and implicated a handful of influential families. The grand jury eventually returned indictments on charges of tampering with historical records, conspiracy, and accessory to the cover-up of a decades-old murder. Although not every name was publicly disclosed, the indictments confirmed that the manipulation of the past had been an organized effort designed to protect powerful interests. The news sent shockwaves through the community. Public debates erupted at town hall meetings and in local newspapers as residents grappled with the disturbing notion that the official history they had long accepted was built on a foundation of deceit. The trial that followed was one of the most emotionally charged in the county's history. In a packed courtroom, federal prosecutors presented their meticulously compiled evidence. Expert witnesses, including forensic historians and digital analysts, testified about the subtle alterations in the archival records and the consistent patterns of deleted communications. One historian, her voice resonating with both authority and sorrow, displayed side-by-side comparisons of original property deeds and the revised versions, highlighting discrepancies that had reaped vast benefits for those who controlled the narrative. Former law enforcement officers recounted chilling tales of colleagues who had vanished after questioning the official story, their voices trembling as they described a culture of silence that had pervaded the investigation decades ago. Detective Ortiz took the stand, her testimony measured yet impassioned. She detailed the discovery of Evan Ramirez's body at the boardwalk, the painstaking process of recovering his digital files, and the overwhelming evidence that linked his final investigation to a long-buried cover-up. With each carefully chosen word, she recounted the trail of evidence that began with a quiet, dedicated tour guide and culminated in a web of historical revisionism that spanned generations. The courtroom was silent as she described the significance of the handwritten notes, the grainy surveillance footage capturing a shadowy figure at the abandoned warehouse, and the persistent warnings that had been left behind by anonymous sources. Her narrative was not just a chronicle of events, it was a testament to the courage it took to challenge the status quo and to honor the memory of a man who had dared to seek the truth. Though the trial resulted in several convictions, mid-level administrators and a few financial officers were sentenced to lengthy prison terms. The highest echelons of the conspiracy managed to evade full accountability by exploiting legal technicalities and the impenetrable aura of legacy. One prominent member of the implicated family was acquitted on a technicality, leaving many in the courtroom with a bitter sense of injustice. The mystery of the redacted signatures and the elusive figure captured on surveillance footage lingered like a ghost, a reminder that while the wheels of justice might turn, some forces remain hidden, protecting their secrets behind layers of bureaucracy and tradition. In the months that followed the trial, the community of the coastal town was forever transformed. The boardwalk, once a symbol of carefree summer days and community unity, became a place of quiet reflection, a reminder of the dark undercurrents that could flow beneath even the most familiar facades. Local government officials, spurred by public outcry, enacted new regulations to ensure greater transparency in the management of public records and the oversight of historical archives. Town hall meetings became arenas for impassioned debates about the nature of truth, the importance of preserving history, and the responsibility of those in power to remain accountable. Independent investigative journalists picked up the case, producing in-depth reports and documentaries that explored not only the specifics of the cover-up, but also the broader implications for how history was recorded and remembered. Academic conferences featured papers on the case as a striking example of historical revisionism and the role of whistleblowers in safeguarding public memory. The legacy of Evan Ramirez, though marred by tragedy, had sparked a movement, a renewed commitment to holding the powerful accountable and ensuring that the past could not be manipulated to serve narrow interests. Detective Ortiz, although recognized as a hero by many, found that the case left an indelible mark on her soul. In the solitude of her modest office, lit by the soft glow of a desk lamp and filled with case files and personal mementos, she often reread Evan's journal and reviewed the digital evidence that had been painstakingly recovered. The faded photograph from the anonymous letter, the redacted memos, and the grainy image of the shadowy figure in the warehouse continued to haunt her thoughts, a reminder that some questions might never be fully answered, that some truths might always remain partially obscured. Yet her determination never wavered. Each new case was approached with the same fierce commitment to uncovering what lay beneath the surface of the official narrative. Years later, the story of Evan Ramirez and the decades-old cover-up became interwoven with the town's identity. The boardwalk still thrived with the vibrancy of everyday life, the sound of laughter, the scent of salt and sunscreen, the rhythm of footsteps along the wooden planks. Yet for those who knew the full story, there was an added layer of awareness. Every new exhibition at the local museum, every revision of historical documents, every community forum about civic transparency was tinged with the memory of a man who had risked everything to ensure that the hidden past would not remain forever concealed. The case, though not offering the tidy resolution of unmasking every conspirator, had ignited a lasting change in the way the town viewed its history. There were no neat endings here, only the enduring legacy of courage and the unyielding pursuit of truth. In the soft murmur of voices at town meetings and the careful scrutiny of old records by dedicated scholars, the memory of Evan Ramirez shone as a beacon, a symbol of the belief that every secret, no matter how deeply buried, deserves to be brought into the light. For Detective Laura Ortiz, the investigation was both a professional triumph and a personal odyssey. Each day as she patrolled the quiet streets, passed by the revitalized boardwalk, or sat in her office surrounded by the artifacts of past cases, she carried with her the resolve to never let the pursuit of truth be stifled by those who wield power. Her work was a continuous reminder that history is not static. It is shaped by the voices that dare to speak up, by the meticulous record-keeping of those who believe that transparency is a right, and by the tireless efforts of investigators who refuse to let silence prevail. In a final, poignant moment that encapsulated the bittersweet nature of the case, Detective Ortiz received one last anonymous envelope, a simple, unadorned sheet of paper with a typed message. In every chapter, the truth endures. There was no signature, no further explanation, just those words resonating like a solemn promise. It was a quiet affirmation that despite the unresolved mysteries and the enduring shadows, the relentless quest for accountability and historical accuracy would never cease. And so, as dusk settled over the boardwalk each evening, and the soft glow of streetlights mingled with the rhythmic sound of waves crashing on the shore, the legacy of Evan Ramirez continued to inspire a community to question, to investigate, and to hold fast to the belief that every uncovered secret is a step toward a more honest, transparent future. The case became a living narrative, a mosaic of courage, loss, and the ongoing struggle to preserve the integrity of history, a testament to the idea that, in a world where power often obscures reality, the light of inquiry will always shine through, however faintly, revealing truths that can never be fully silenced. At Wonderworld Amusement Park, The lights of the giant Ferris wheel glowed like beacons against the twilight, while laughter and excited chatter filled the air. Families strolled along winding paths between roller coasters and water rides, and the smell of buttery popcorn mingled with the tang of ocean air. For decades, this park had been a symbol of pure, unbridled joy, a place where memories were made. But on one sweltering summer evening, the celebration of life was interrupted by an event that would forever stain the park's legacy. That night, amid the frenetic energy of a record-breaking crowd and an electrifying concert on the main stage, a disturbance was discovered in the quiet, behind-the-scenes corridors of the park. Marcus Bell, a ride safety inspector known for his uncompromising dedication and affable nature, was found dead in a narrow service tunnel beneath one of the park's most popular attractions, a looping roller coaster that had thrilled generations of riders. His body was slumped against the cold concrete wall, his expression frozen in an inexplicable mixture of terror and resignation. Clutched tightly in his hand was a scrap of paper, its ink smudged by sweat and blood. The brief, jagged message read, "Some truths can't be hidden." Within minutes, the park's security team secured the area, and uniformed officers arrived, turning a once festive corridor into a grim crime scene. Detective Fiona Garcia, an investigator with a reputation for a relentless pursuit of details, stepped into the tunnel with measured determination. Under the flicker of failing fluorescent lights, she took in every nuance of the scene: the deliberate positioning of Marcus's body, the absence of signs of a desperate struggle, and the haunting final message that suggested the victim had been driven to expose something that someone had fought to conceal. Over the next several days, Detective Garcia began interviewing employees and patrons whose lives had intersected with Marcus Bell. Colleagues described him as a man who cared deeply about the integrity of every ride, every bolt and cable of the park's attractions. Marcus had an eye for the smallest irregularity, recalled Terrence, a veteran technician. He would double-check the safety reports and wouldn't let anything slide, even if it meant going over the same checklist several times. Lately, though, he seemed distracted, almost as if he was chasing a ghost. Other staff mentioned that Marcus had been spending extra hours reviewing internal records and making anonymous phone calls, as if gathering evidence of something he believed was amiss with the park's operations. At his small apartment near the park, an unpretentious dwelling decorated with framed photos of his favorite rides and newspaper clippings of past safety awards, investigators discovered a trove of personal documents. Among these was a worn leather journal filled with meticulous entries, sketches, and observations. Early pages chronicled routine maintenance checks and observations about the day-to-day performance of rides, but as the entries progressed, the tone shifted dramatically. Marcus began documenting subtle discrepancies, missing bolts from ride supports, minor delays in scheduled maintenance, and irregularities in the parts inventory. One entry, penned in an urgent scrawl just days before his death, read, "The safety logs don't match the real conditions. I found parts unaccounted for, and reports that contradict what I see. If this isn't just an oversight, someone is cutting corners, and it's a matter of life and death." His words conveyed not only a professional commitment to ensuring public safety, but also a personal conviction that he was on the verge of exposing something dangerous. Digital forensic experts later recovered fragments of deleted text messages from Marcus's work tablet. In one recovered message, sent from an untraceable number, the message warned, "Don't push further, or you'll vanish." The terse tone was void of emotion, but heavy with threat, reinforcing the notion that Marcus had provoked powerful adversaries by probing too deeply into the park's operational records. Detective Garcia widened her investigation beyond the maintenance corridors. She interviewed supervisors, ride operators, and even the park's longtime vendor representatives. Many spoke of changes over the past several months that had raised concerns. Andrea Lopez, a ride operator on the looping coaster, recalled that a few weeks earlier, management had instituted flexible adjustment protocols for routine safety checks. "They said it was to improve efficiency," she explained. "But I noticed that every time there was an incident, even a minor one, the reports were quietly altered." Marcus always looked troubled when he mentioned it, as if he suspected the numbers were being manipulated. His concern, combined with his determined habit of keeping his own records, began to suggest a deliberate effort to hide the truth about maintenance irregularities. Meanwhile, internal audit reports from Wonderworld's corporate office revealed a disturbing trend. Although the park's public image was one of reliability and safety, a deeper look into the internal documents uncovered that several minor discrepancies in the maintenance logs had been corrected by upper management without explanation. These corrections, noted in a series of encrypted memos and sealed approvals, often coincided with periods when ride performance had been questioned by staff. The pattern was too consistent to be accidental, a systematic effort to obscure lapses in safety protocols. Forensic accountants determined that, over time, the cumulative effect of these adjustments represented a significant divergence from standard operational procedures, one that could potentially compromise the safety of the park's attractions. Detective Garcia began to suspect that Marcus's investigation had revealed more than simple administrative errors. The evidence hinted at a deliberate scheme to cut costs by skimping on proper maintenance, a scheme that could put lives at risk. The financial losses were negligible in comparison to the potential human cost, but the hidden truth could have far-reaching consequences. It became increasingly clear that someone with decision-making authority was willing to override safety protocols for personal gain, and that Marcus Bell's efforts to document these irregularities had endangered him. As the investigation progressed, Detective Garcia's team uncovered surveillance footage from the park's security cameras that offered a new lead. In a series of grainy recordings, a figure wearing a dark jacket and cap was seen entering a restricted area near the ride's control room shortly before the time of Marcus's murder. Although the camera's quality was poor, the individual's movements were deliberate, as if he had known exactly where to go. Cross-referencing this footage with digital access logs revealed that the door had been opened with a key card assigned to a newly promoted supervisor, Victor Ramirez, a name that hadn't surfaced in previous inquiries. Ramirez had only recently taken over responsibility for the ride's operations, and his rapid ascent within the organization had raised eyebrows among some of his colleagues. When Detective Garcia questioned Victor Ramirez, he provided a rehearsed account of his duties. "I was simply following the new procedures introduced last month," he explained in a calm, measured tone. "There were adjustments made to the maintenance schedule to streamline operations. I have nothing to do with any irregularities." His eyes, however, betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. Further investigation into his digital footprint revealed that he had accessed the internal system at unusual hours on several occasions, the same times when discrepancies were noted in the records. His connection to the restricted areas of the park, coupled with the anonymous warnings that had been received by Marcus, made him a person of significant interest. At the same time, Detective Garcia received another anonymous tip, a handwritten note dropped off at her office. The note, printed on plain paper, stated, "In the shadow of the ride, secrets crumble to dust." No signature was included, but the message struck a chord, suggesting that someone was aware of the hidden truths Marcus had been uncovering. The note hinted at the possibility that the cover-up extended far beyond routine financial adjustments. It pointed to a deliberate suppression of dangerous information that, if made public, could have exposed a massive failure in safety protocols and cost lives. As the layers of the investigation unfolded, the digital forensics team continued to work through the encrypted messages recovered from Marcus's tablet. They managed to decrypt several more messages that pointed to a network of communications between individuals within the park's management. One message, though fragmentary, warned, "If the records come to light, we will do whatever is necessary to ensure they remain hidden." The language was devoid of personal sentiment but carried a cold, methodical resolve that chilled Detective Garcia to the bone. Determined to piece together the full extent of the conspiracy, Detective Garcia arranged to meet with a former safety inspector who had retired abruptly after raising concerns about the park's maintenance practices. The ex-inspector, a gruff man named Samuel "Sammy" Ortiz, recalled that a few months before his departure, he had observed that certain parts of the roller coaster, bolts, cables, and safety restraints, were consistently short compared to the documented specifications. "I raised the issue internally," Sammy said in a low voice, "but my concerns were brushed aside. They said it was just a minor oversight, nothing to worry about. But I knew that if you cut corners on safety, you're gambling with lives." His recollections reinforced the notion that the adjustments in the maintenance records were not benign errors but deliberate actions taken to reduce costs at the expense of safety. With mounting evidence and several key leads pointing toward a cover-up that had cost a dedicated life, Detective Garcia coordinated a series of joint operations with federal agents and local law enforcement. In one high-stakes raid at a storage facility on the outskirts of the park, investigators uncovered a cache of stolen ride components, spare parts that had been removed from the roller coaster and other attractions, hidden away in a locked room behind a false wall. Among the items was a logbook containing detailed entries that matched the anomalies recorded in Marcus's journal. The logbook, written in a precise, unadorned hand, listed inventory counts, dates, and even the initials of a few employees. The evidence was damning. It confirmed that the theft of critical components was part of a coordinated scheme to divert resources for illicit resale, and that these actions had likely compromised the safety of the park's attractions. As the investigation neared its climax, Detective Garcia compiled all her findings into a comprehensive report, a dossier that detailed every element of the case, from the discovery of Marcus Bell's body to the intricate web of digital communications and altered records that pointed to systemic negligence and deliberate malfeasance. The report was presented to the district attorney in a series of closed-door briefings, and it soon formed the basis for a grand jury inquiry. Intense sessions held in a modest county courthouse, the full scope of the operation was laid out, a network of managers and technicians who had colluded to cut corners on maintenance, funneling valuable equipment to underground markets, and covering up the results with carefully manipulated records. The grand jury returned indictments on charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide, a legal acknowledgement that the death of Marcus Bell was not an isolated incident, but the final act in a long chain of deliberate cover-ups. The ensuing trial became one of the most closely watched legal proceedings in the region. In a packed courtroom filled with local residents, families of park employees, and a media swarm that captured every detail, federal prosecutors presented their case with painstaking clarity. Expert witnesses took the stand, digital forensic analysts who demonstrated how the deleted messages from Marcus's tablet had been reconstructed, forensic accountants who explained how the minor discrepancies in the maintenance logs added up to a deliberate diversion of funds and assets, and historians who provided context on the evolution of the park's safety protocols. Each piece of evidence was carefully laid out, a mosaic that told the tragic story of a man who had tried to protect the public from dangerous cost-cutting measures, only to pay with his life. In one particularly poignant moment during the trial, a former technician stepped forward and recounted how he had once seen a supervisor quietly replacing a batch of safety bolts without recording the change. His voice trembled as he said, "I was afraid to speak up, but I knew something was wrong." Marcus always said that every missing bolt was a ticking time bomb. The testimony sent a ripple of silence through the courtroom, as the jury and spectators alike grappled with the realization that lives might have been endangered by a systemic culture of indifference and corruption. Detective Garcia's testimony was marked by a quiet strength. On the stand, she detailed the day she found Marcus's body, the exact position of the note in his hand, and the painstaking process of piecing together his final investigation from scattered journal entries, recovered emails, and surveillance footage. Her clear, measured delivery contrasted sharply with the emotional accounts from former employees, and it lent a rational weight to the compelling narrative that had been built over the course of the trial. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the trial did not deliver complete justice. Several mid-level managers and technicians were convicted on charges of fraud and conspiracy, receiving lengthy prison sentences. However, the top figures responsible for authorizing the dangerous cost-cutting measures managed to elude full accountability by exploiting legal technicalities and the inherent complexities of corporate oversight. The names of those at the highest levels were redacted in public documents, leaving a lingering, unsettling gap in the narrative. A reminder that even as some perpetrators were brought to justice, others remained shrouded in secrecy. In the aftermath of the trial, Wonderworld amusement park struggled to reconcile its identity as a cherished source of community joy with the dark revelations that had emerged from its depths. The park's management implemented sweeping changes, stricter maintenance protocols, independent oversight committees, and a commitment to transparent record-keeping. New safety measures were installed on rides, and regular audits became a standard practice. Yet for many in the community, the scars of that fateful night remained, a reminder that the price of neglecting safety and accountability can be measured not just in financial loss, but in human life. Local media revisited the case repeatedly, drawing parallels between the tragic death of Marcus Bell and other instances of corporate malfeasance in public venues. Town hall meetings were held in which citizens demanded that the park's leadership be held accountable, and activists organized campaigns to protect workers who dared to question irregularities. The story of Marcus Bell became a cautionary tale, a symbol of how one individual's unwavering commitment to truth could disrupt a corrupt system, even if the victory was only partial. Detective Fiona Garcia, now a seasoned investigator, with a deeper understanding of the delicate interplay between public safety and corporate ambition, continued her work with a sense of solemn determination. Late at night, when the neon glow of the park's attractions softened into the distant hum of the city, she would sit in her modest office and review the recovered documents. Marcus's journal, the altered maintenance logs, and the decrypted messages that had warned of dire consequences. Each artifact served as a reminder of the cost of silence, of the risks inherent in challenging an established order, and of the fragile balance between progress and safety. In time, Wonderworld Amusement Park took on a new role in the community, a living monument to both the exhilaration of youth and the vigilance required to safeguard it. Families who once visited the park with unbridled enthusiasm now did so with a renewed awareness, questioning and inspecting, ever mindful that behind every thrill ride, every dazzling light display, there might be a hidden story waiting to be uncovered. The park's management, having endured public scrutiny and legal reforms, began to engage openly with the community, sharing detailed reports of maintenance checks and safety audits. They held open forums where questions were welcomed, and transparency was not just a promise but a practiced reality. The case of Marcus Bell, with all its intricate details and unresolved mysteries, remained a permanent fixture in local lore. It was discussed in community colleges as a case study in investigative journalism and corporate ethics. Independent filmmakers produced documentaries that captured the emotional journey of those affected by the tragedy. Even in casual conversation, among friends gathered on quiet evenings at local diners, the memory of the dedicated ride inspector who had given his life in the pursuit of truth was recalled with a mix of sorrow, admiration, and a fervent hope that such tragedies would never recur. While the trial had delivered some measure of justice, Detective Garcia never ceased to believe that the pursuit of truth was an endless journey. Every new lead, every anomaly in a safety report, and every whispered tip was another step in the ongoing struggle to ensure that public safety was never compromised for the sake of profit. The unresolved threads, the shadowy figures seen on surveillance footage, the cryptic warnings from anonymous sources, and the redacted names in the ledger, continued to haunt her, reminding her that corruption often hides in plain sight, masked by routine and complacency. Years later, as the park's ride spun under the soft glow of twilight, and the echoes of laughter mingled with the gentle rustle of palm trees, the legacy of Marcus Bell's sacrifice endured. His name was etched into a memorial plaque near the park's entrance, a tribute to the man who had risked everything for the sake of safety and accountability. Every time a new safety regulation was introduced or a maintenance protocol was revised, community members recalled the case as a poignant reminder that every uncovered secret, every unchallenged discrepancy, could have dire consequences. Detective Fiona Garcia continued to champion the cause of transparency in her work, her dedication fueled by the memory of Marcus's unwavering pursuit of the truth. Each investigation that followed was approached with a deep-seated awareness that the smallest irregularity could be the catalyst for a much larger story, a story that might one day save lives. Her own career was marked by the lessons learned from Wonderworld's dark chapter, and she mentored younger officers with the belief that integrity must always triumph over complacency. In the tapestry of public spaces, from the thrill of amusement parks to the quiet comfort of libraries and community centers, the story of Marcus Bell remained a potent symbol of the risks inherent in confronting hidden wrongs. It was a reminder that the quest for truth is never easy, that every revelation comes with a cost, and that those who choose to speak out against corruption must do so with unwavering courage. And while not every mystery is fully resolved, and some shadows persist despite all efforts to dispel them, the legacy of one man's determination continues to inspire, to challenge, and to remind us all that safety, transparency, and accountability are the cornerstones of a just society. As summer gave way to autumn, and the park's vibrant attractions gradually faded into the softer hues of fall, the community carried with it the enduring message of that fateful night. The boardwalk, the Ferris wheel, and the roller coaster all stood as silent witnesses to the promise that the pursuit of truth, no matter how daunting, would always be a cause worth fighting for. In every heart that skipped a beat on a thrilling ride, and in every mind that questioned the details behind the smiles of trusted custodians, the story of Marcus Bell served as both a caution and a beacon, a testament to the fact that while corruption may wear many disguises, the courage to expose it remains timeless. And so, beneath the ever-changing skies, and amid the ceaseless pulse of life at Wonderworld Amusement Park, the legacy of one dedicated safety inspector lived on, a story of quiet defiance against a system that once chose silence over truth. And a reminder that every uncovered secret, however hidden, is a call to ensure that justice, in all its forms, endures.